Put down the chips and salsa is something I wish someone had said to me last night or the night before. This week, we're talking about emotional eating, why you do it, and how you can stop. If you often find yourself going for that late night snack or you swing by the pantry for a pick-me-up when you're feeling down, this episode is for you.
Our guest is Tricia Nelson. She's the host of the Heal Your Hunger show and author of Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. You mentioned chips. I'm kind of hungry. Can I get some chips?
This is The Fit Mess, conversations with world-class experts in the fields of mental, physical, and emotional health. In this episode,
when I hear somebody say, I don't really care anymore, I'm like, that's probably bullshit. You probably care, but you're afraid to hope because your hopes have been dashed so many times.
Now here are your hosts, Zach and Jeremy.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Fit Mess podcast. We appreciate being a part of whatever it is that you're doing right now. Hopefully what you're doing is something healthy or taking care of yourself and not doing what we're about to talk about, emotional eating.
Zach, this is a topic that really means a lot to me. I know specifically when I started doing it, but I only recently got curious enough to figure out that it's something I still do now. We mentioned at the beginning the chips and salsa. That's not a joke. Last night I literally was eating chips and salsa. I wasn't hungry. I just felt like I needed something. Today, just before we started recording this show, I'm getting a little anxious. We got to put on a show. We got to entertain. I get anxious. And there's this part of my brain that tells me, oh, you should eat something real quick. This could take an hour or two. You might get hungry. You don't want that to happen. All these messages just start like auto-firing in my head. And it is a battle of willpower all day long to set them aside and try and do the right thing.
I actually had my moment of it today too. I had a rough day where I had a bunch of important people on a phone call and I was the only one that disagreed with the course of action. And I had to convince everyone to go the opposite way. So it was very stressful for me, but I did win. But I got off the important
part here. If you take nothing else away, Zach won today.
Exactly. But I got off the call and I went down to the kitchen immediately and opened up the pantry. Didn't see anything good. Opened up the fridge. Didn't see anything good. Tail between my legs, walked back to my office without something that would feed my emotional need.
Right.
And I got back into my office and I had just taken a trip to Florida. And in my backpack, which was on my desk, which I emptied out, I saw a bag of Southwest pretzels.
Like Southwest Airlines, like the pretzels from the airplane. Right.
That you get on the airplane.
Right.
My brain went ding, 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 ding. Yes, I can fill my void and I can emotionally eat. And then the other part of my brain just saw COVID all over the bag.
Oh, God.
It was I got those on an airplane after I touched this and that. And they're disgust. Nope. I ripped that bag open and I ate it anyway.
It's such an awful habit. I still have triggers. There's something about coming home. And I think it is an old memory from school. You get home from school, you have a snack, right? I will literally be eating in the car on the way home, walk in the front door and automatically go to the kitchen. What is there to eat? I just ate and I walk in the door and I need to eat more just because it's a habit that I've built over 40 years. And I know I still remember it was third grade and I made this new friend and he would come over and we would watch TV. And every time there was a commercial, he would say it was munchie break or snack break or something. And my parents, they would go shopping at Costco. So we had literally a room in our house was the pantry. And we would buy all kinds of, the Nutter Butter bars and all this stuff. Literally every commercial, we're running in there and getting something. And that fed this, I'm comfortable, I'm home, I have connection with my friend. That still is with me now. That need to shove food in my face for comfort and connection, even if I'm by myself.
Yeah. Mine was similar up until the age of 6. I didn't have a lot to eat. I've told this story a few times, but I had to steal food from the grocery store in order to eat.
Right.
There was no food. And when CPS took me away from my mom and I moved in with my dad, there was food in the house all the time. And he grew up in the Depression. So if there was a sale on Oreos, he would go buy 30 packages of them on sale.
Right.
So we had a whole cupboard dedicated to cookies. When I moved in with him, I was oh my God, there's all this. Well, I better start eating because I don't know when I'm going to get my next meal.
Yeah.
And blew up like crazy. But that was my comfort zone.
Yep.
When I was a kid, and I wasn't even hungry. I was just making sure that I was well fed and I had lots of reserve energy, going forward. But again, translated 40 years later or 30 years later, here I am going, oh, that is a stressful day. I'm going to eat a bag of pretzels covered in COVID and I don't care. And I'm going to lick my fingers when I'm done.
So weird how the scale keeps going up and down for us, isn't it? It's just like, I wish I could explain it. I don't understand. It's just odd.
I know, but I will say 10 years ago, when I finally figured this out, it is emotional eating, and I will try and be friends with it. And I understand that sometimes I just need a little emotional eating to get through a situation.
Yeah.
And just feed it and do it occasionally. So I still do it now, but like I figured it out 10 years ago that it was emotional eating through fasting and not eating for 3 days, where I was like, I would get up and it was just programmed. It was habit. I would just get up and go to the fridge.
Yep.
Like, I'm not hungry. I haven't eaten anything in 2 days. I'm not hungry in the moment. Why am I going to the refrigerator?
So much of this reminds me of when we talked to Judd Brewer on a previous episode, and he talked about how willpower is simply not enough to curb any craving like that, any addictive craving. And he talked about how there's basically 4 triggers to addictive response. And you're hungry, you're angry, you're lonely, or you're tired. And typically all of those things happen at night. So it's no wonder that I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I can fast like a champ. I just got to wait till noon. Pfft, no big deal. Eat a meal, no big deal, off and running. End of the day, have some dinner. Oh, I'm good. Yeah. But now I've had the stress of work or hustling for work or whatever it is, being a dad, being a husband, walking the dogs who probably peed on the floor. All of the things that have built up have now shattered my reserves. My energy is drained. I'm hungry. I'm tired. It's been a stressful day. Where is my bag of COVID chips?
You can be like a macrovirus, see the thing on it with a note going, I am COVID. I am still going to lick the bag when I see the crumb on the bag.
Try new Cheez-Its Delta version.
Ooh, that is dual meaning. I flew Southwest though.
When you do what you love, like running, biking, and enjoying the great outdoors, you want to do it for life. Inside Tracker can help. It was founded in 2009 by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometrics. Inside Tracker analyzes your data to provide you with a clear picture of what's going on inside your body and offers you science-backed recommendations for positive diet and lifestyle changes. With Inside Tracker's concrete action plan, you'll be able to track your progress toward reaching your goals every day. And for a limited time, we've teamed up with Inside Tracker to provide our listeners with a chance to win the ultimate Inside Tracker prize package. Head on over to insidetracker.com/fitmess giveaway or click the link on our website and enter for a chance to win a prize pack worth more than $1,700 from Inside Tracker.
All right. Well, now that we've told you all about our emotional eating histories, we should probably get to the interview because there's some leftover mac and cheese on the stove upstairs I need to go pound.
I'm sure there's still a few chips in the bag.
But seriously, I wish that I had Tricia Nelson's book and her podcast 10 years ago when I was learning about my own emotional eating. It would have made things a whole lot easier. But fortunately, Tricia Nelson is here for you now. And we had the opportunity to talk to her about her book and her journey of losing 50 pounds herself.
It's been a long journey, and my experience as it is for people who have food issues. I started out as a kid just obsessed with food. So food was like my most exciting thing to think about. And I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to serve it to other people, go out to dinner. All that was exciting for me. And that would have been fine, except that I gained weight very easily. So by age 20, I was 50 pounds overweight and really miserable about it. I was not okay with it. I felt different from my friends. My mobility was challenged. I mean, not that I couldn't get around, but at the beach, my legs would chafe because there were, that big thighs, and I had a roll in my tummy that would scrunch up in my hand. And imagine cutting off, like you can get like fat off the side of a steak. So some pretty crazy thoughts. I even thought about contracting some disease where I'd automatically lose weight without having to diet. And that was all really reflective of the fact that I felt desperate. I really felt like I've tried diets, I've tried pills and potions. I even went so far as to try 12-step programs and eating disorders therapy. So books, of course, you read a ton of books, stuff online, but I tried so many things, and I'd always get back to the same place. I could lose weight, but I'd put it back on. And I was a yo-yoer. I was like up 30, down 20, up 10, and so frustrating. And at some point, I just felt like this sucks and I'm never going to get there. And this problem is you feel like you're the only one. Like everybody else is losing weight. Everybody else is looking great, but I'm this loser who can't lose, basically. And so I really came to my wit's end. And at that point, by the grace of God, I met somebody who had been obese, lost the weight, but it wasn't by any crazy diet or impossible exercise program. It was really through the inner journey, healing the things that were blocking him. And he showed me how to heal that within myself, basically how to clear away the blocks to freedom, the blocks to joy, the blocks to just effortlessness around food. And so my experience is if you deal with the underlying causes, you just don't need as much food and you don't need as heavy foods either. So that's what happened for me. And from that point on, I was totally excited to share it with other people. And fast forward many, many years, I'm still, by the grace of God, in a thin body and have a system, a very specific step-by-step system to share with people who do have the same struggles so that they don't have to keep dieting, because it's not about the food. And so the people who are drawn to me are people who know by bitter experience it's not about the food, because when you do diets long enough, you're like, okay, there's got to be another way, And so those are the people I attract.
So I definitely want to get to the steps in just a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about what you discovered was the root of your issue was the emotional eating. And so I guess describe what emotional eating is. What does it look like in both an extreme situation and in maybe ways that people do and don't recognize?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to mean that you're overweight. A lot of people think you have to be obese to be an emotional eater, and it's not true. You can be in a thin body but be obsessed with food, be completely owned by ooey gooey chewy foods, as I call them, where that's all you want to eat. And when you eat it, you can't stop. And so you finish the whole box or the whole bag, and then you feel disgusting. And then you're pissed at yourself. And then you're like berating yourself or having no control. So that's one scenario. So there's also just eating unhealthy food. Some people think, oh, you have to be a binger to be an emotional eater. Not so. Right. Like you can eat normal meals, but the foods you're drawn to can have an emotional component. And what I mean by that is emotional eaters tend to be drawn to heavier foods with sugar, fat, and carbs. My favorite 3 food groups, actually. So, and the reason why is because those foods basically numb our feelings. So that's like, why do we eat potatoes instead of broccoli? Why do we prefer a banana over an apple? It's a little denser, a little heavier, and it gives us a little more feeling of being full. And that's good when you're not comfortable not being full, And so that's really the deal, is when you just constantly eat or snack, or you want heavier foods, you have no appetite for salads or light, watery foods. They just don't feel substantial enough. You want cheesy, meaty, fatty things. In my experience, it's really for emotional reasons that we're drawn in that way. Emotional eaters come in a lot of different forms, but the bottom line answer is we use food for emotional reasons.
Where does that come from? Where is that a learned behavior? Is there something in our DNA that makes someone more prone to that sort of thing? Where does that emotional eating come from?
Well, it's a great question. I think it's both. For me, my parents gained weight very easily. So they were chubby as kids. So they have the DNA. They have the propensity to gain weight easily, slow metabolism. I definitely got that gene. And so as I said, was fat at a pretty young age. I mean, I could look at chocolate cake and gain a pound, So it's definitely, there's a physical aspect to it. I also am very sensitive to sugar. So when I eat sugar, I tend to overeat sugar. I also was sensitive to alcohol. And I think that's hereditary too. I mean, I was a blackout drinker at like age 14, and alcohol does happen to be the most refined form of sugar you can get, And so I think that my sugar sensitivity and alcohol sensitivity are born from the same place. And so there's a physical aspect to it. But if that were just the case, then I would just do away with sugar, do it with alcohol, just sort of eat the easy, like the non-carby foods. But the problem is I have a penchant for those foods, and that tends to be more emotional. So for me, there's definitely a correlation between we've got the physical setup, but then we have the emotional setup, which is an environment as children, which tends to have trauma. Okay. So there's no question. I mean, you can have a happy childhood and still be an emotional eater, but statistically speaking, most emotional eaters have had trauma, either physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And as kids, we don't have a lot of options for soothing ourselves. I mean, we can't go down to the red light district and have sex or score cocaine, or heroin. So as kids, we have to choose what's available, and food is readily available. For me, it was food, sweets, masturbation, and fantasy. Like as a kid, you don't have a whole lot else, Right. And so that's what I turned to numb myself, numb my feelings. And so it is an addictive habit. So when I started so young, and started quelling my emotions, soothing my emotions with food, it just grows into a monster. And so you can't really stop the train once you get on it. And because you're just so used to numbing, and so used to obsessing. And it just, as adults, it's just still there. And that's why this struggle for people can go on for decades. And I have clients who have struggled for decades, literally, because when you first realize you need to do something about your weight, if you have a weight issue, you're like, I'll go on a diet, but no, a diet will not work. I mean, 98% of all diets fail, statistically speaking. So, I mean, within a year, statistically speaking, you will gain all the weight back that you lost. Yeah. So people have to do that time and time again to realize, oh my God, this is not going to get me where I need to go. I need to do something else. What I try to do, and thanks for having me on the show, because this is how I do it, is I try to carry the message that, hey, let's stop addressing this at the symptom level. Let's go deeper. Let's deal with those underlying causes, those deeper wounds. Not that I always say you don't need 20 years of therapy to heal emotional eating. Yeah. Like I make it really simple by laying out a step-by-step process, for really addressing those feelings, and also just for dealing with stress, because stress is a big part of it as well. Emotional eaters tend to be overdoers, like overeaters are overdoers, and we tend to say yes to everybody and take on more than we should and be stressed out all the time. And of course that increases cortisol, and cortisol causes us to be hungry and to store fat instead of burning it. So really important that we deal with stuff and create new tools for healthier living. So it's really a win-win. I mean, I have an awesome life because I was fat and had to find a solution, and the solution helped me just be better all the way around.
Yeah. Turning your pain into purpose, as they say.
Yeah.
Before we get to the steps, I'm curious, you've described at least the symptoms of a traumatic childhood: blackout drinking at 14, weight issues at 20. Part of this show is sort of unveiling the ugly side of all this. Can you share a little bit about what the trauma was that you went through? Am I prying too much in going there?
No, not at all. I am such an open book. I had sexual abuse starting at 5, from about age 5 to 10, with a family member, relative, if you will. And this person was underage. They themselves had sexual abuse as well. And, as you probably know, hurt people. When you don't have proper tools to deal with your pain, often you act out in the same way. So that's what happens. I try to rationalize and minimize it because it was with a minor as well, an older minor. And yet it doesn't really matter what form it took or who it was or how minimal it was. It still messes you up. It's just a fucked up thing to be sexual at an inappropriate age when you're not developmentally able to handle the feelings. So that's what happened. And so I buried it, didn't tell anybody. Of course, it's a big secret. Yeah. So you live with shame. I had shame about my body. I hated my body. I thought I was dirty. I thought I was bad. I thought I was perverted because, of course, then I became a oversexed person and compulsively masturbated. And so I was just really hurting without any kind of way to deal with it. And food is such a typical thing that people turn to when they do have sexual abuse, because if it makes you gain weight, then you can protect yourself, or you perceive that you can protect yourself. But it's a typical unconscious behavior that makes you think that somehow you're going to be protected. So yeah, so it was a terrible experience. I don't actually regret it because I've dealt with it, and it just makes me so much more able to help other people, because so many of the people I help have been sexually abused. And it's a unique experience. Not that a whole lot of people haven't experienced it, but nobody's talking about it. So the fact that I can understand and have sensitivity around that does help me be able to help other people. But I definitely had to deal with it, so it didn't keep dealing with me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so first, I'm sorry that you went through all that. That is awful for anyone to experience.
Thank you.
You mentioned shame, and this is something that's interesting that's come up a couple times for us this year. We've talked to a couple of different body positivity advocates. And so I'm curious your take on body positivity. I mean, one of the things that we've heard echoed in those interviews is that you can't see health. So if you see somebody who's overweight, they're not necessarily unhealthy. You have no way of knowing how healthy that person is. You don't know their biomarkers. You don't know what's going on with them. So how do you walk the line between encouraging someone to lose weight and having body positivity? Where is that line for you?
Great question. It is a bit of a dilemma. It's like you want to be somewhere other than you are, but in order to get there, you have to accept where you are, you know, and love where you are.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it is tricky. I've been down that road, and I mean, I can't say I ever, like, as a 50-pound overweight person, I loved my body. I did not. I didn't like being fat. And so I think there might be some misconceptions around the body positivity to think that you just have to be okay with where you are and stop there, you know.
Right.
And in my experience, you don't have to stop there. I mean, there's no question. The pandemic proved to us all, if you're carrying extra weight, you have more vulnerability to having compromises that make you more susceptible to viruses, you know? So, I mean, it's not like we can sit here and talk about how good it is to be overweight. I mean, it's my experiences. I mean, then you have the whole cultural thing. I mean, even though 1 in 3 people in our country, in the US, is overweight or obese, I mean, it's a common experience. And yet culturally, there's so much shame around it still. It's still not okay.
Yeah.
And yet it's so common. I mean, I live down near Disneyland in LA, and they had to shut down It's a Small World, the ride called It's a Small World, because back in the 50s, we didn't have as many obese people, and they had to shut it down and create all new cars to go through that ride because we have an obese nation now. So it is a tricky thing. I personally, and I always like to bring it back to my personal experience, I hated carrying extra weight. I hated it. It sucked so bad. And so what drives me every day to help people with weight loss and making peace with their bodies is my own memory of how alienated I felt, how immobilized I felt in ways. I mean, I was very active and I was young when I changed my life, but at the same time, I lived with that shame. I lived with being bigger than my friends. I lived with the obsession with food. I mean, I'd go to to a place like Denny's or Friendly's if you're from the Northeast, and my friends would order a sandwich and it would come with fries. And I would do the same, and they'd eat their sandwich and pick up their fries. I'd eat my fries and pick up my sandwich. And I'd sit there, I'd feel like a Martian. I'd sit there and think, who could leave a French fry on the plate? Like, that's crazy.
Totally.
Like, what a waste, you know? So I wasn't the same as my friends. I had this very strange love affair with food. So, I 100% try to teach my clients how to accept themselves exactly where they are, but without this idea that, I mean, if they've come to me, it's because they're not happy with where they are. So you can either accept it 100% and just get okay with it, or you can take steps to change it. And so that was me. Like, I had to do something about it. I did not want to live that way. And I also knew I didn't have to. There's a part of me deep inside of me that knew it didn't have to be that way. And I'll tell you, Jeremy, that I think I talk to a lot of obese people, like every single day, hundreds upon hundreds of obese people. And there's a part of somebody who struggled for so long that, because most of what we have as options have to do with diet and exercise and having to do with changing the symptom, which is virtually impossible if you don't go deeper. But when everybody, the doctors, the therapists, when everybody tends to make it about the food and the weight and gives you solutions that are symptom focused, and it doesn't work because it could never work. It's only the symptom, not the problem. there's a certain amount of defeat that somebody has where they're like, it's never going to work for me. I might as well accept where I am. So there's a difference between acceptance and resignation. And so when I hear somebody say, "Oh, I don't really care anymore," I'm like, that's probably bullshit. You probably care, but you're afraid to hope because your hopes have been dashed so many times. I mean, I've been on the diets. You're like, woohoo, I'm doing it. I'm going to diet. I'm feeling good, going to the gym, looking good, pants getting looser. But then after a couple of weeks, it starts to get hard, like really hard. And then you're like, I can't take anymore. And there's this tension in your gut that starts churning. And then you're like, I cannot last. I've got to have chocolate or I've got to have ice cream. And I know that tension, but the thing is, there's a solution to that. And it's not in a diet. So I think a lot of people, it's my guess that some people who are trying to just be okay with the weight they're at, they know that they feel that they don't have any other option because the diets have failed them. So I'm just here to say, yes, you have to accept where you are because where you are is where you are, and you can't hate your way into doing differently. Yeah. You're not going to hate yourself into flying right. But at the same time, you've bought a bill of goods that's not right. The bill of goods is if you work on your weight, you'll lose weight. And my experience is that the fastest way to gain weight is try to lose weight. And so I get people totally off the diet track. I get them totally not even trying to lose weight because that's a symptom. Overweight is a symptom of overeating. Overeating is a symptom of what's eating me. So the weight loss comes, but we do have to get off of that as the focus. We do have to accept ourselves where we are. And in doing so, we can actually get to a healthier place with our weight, and nobody gets to decide what that is except us.
So your story resonates with me a lot because similar to you, I lost nearly 70 pounds and it started from the inside. Once I started doing the work, started meditating, started really digging deep on what was causing the outer issues, I started to see a way forward. I saw a way to a healthier me. And so I threw myself into a different nutrition plan. I was exercising every day. I was meditating. I was riding my bike like crazy. And so much of it was finding the sort of spiritual relief that came from all of that activity that just kept, one door opened another. And so yeah. I would love to now get into those solutions with you, those 7 steps that you recommend for someone that can have the same experience that we've had by helping that inner pain to be relieved and to see that reflected on the outside.
Well, congratulations on your 70-pound weight loss. That is so awesome. And doing it the right way.
Thank you.
It's so cool. Yeah, I'm sure it feels good. Yes. I mean, stress is a big cause of our problems. And so I do recommend meditation to people. One of my 7 steps is called centeredness. And I have something called the 6 self-care success secrets. And it's meditation, prayer, reading spiritual literature, writing / journaling, talking, and walking. So those are my 6 self-care secrets. And I do, at least 4 of those a day religiously, because what I've found is I need to slow down, again, stop overdoing. I need to start the day getting connected with myself and my divine self. And so I teach people to set up a morning routine, and my day starts with prayer on my knees and then 20 minutes of meditation. I do transcendental meditation. So 20 minutes of meditation. I walk and I pray while I walk because there's just a rhythm there and I feel connected. I'm not religious. It's really more of a spiritual thing for me. And I read spiritual literature because it kind of sets my head straight. If I let my head run wild, it's going to go into dark places, and so I get it started at least, I have hope in the beginning of having it set in the right direction by reading some really positive literature, something really positive and motivational that helps me remember, oh yeah, I'm part of a greater whole. Oh yeah. Like I don't have to do all the work myself. Like spirit can do, the heavy lifting. Like, oh yeah, I am loved. It's like I need these messages because I myself, I'm like the total opposite of all that. So the getting still and quiet in the morning is vital. And I really call it putting money in your spiritual bank account that you can draw on later. If we don't put anything in our bank account later in the day when we're stressed out, frustrated, lonely, whatever, dejected, we're going to try to take withdrawals off of nothing. And then we're going to be in debt. So we're going to instead reach for food, give me that quick hit of coffee or wine or, food, chocolate, because I'm stressed out. And so if I can put money in my spiritual bank account, I can make withdrawals, positive withdrawals later in the day. So that to me is vital. And all my clients they're meditators now, they're awesome. And I wouldn't meditate if I didn't have a weight issue. And so, everybody knows they should meditate. Like, I feel like we live in the day and age that it's no secret. There's hard science behind it. Like this stuff works, but nobody gets around to it. Yeah. But my experience is when you have a weight issue, which my experience is you don't get cured from it. I don't know how you feel about it, but if I stop doing the things I do, if I stop living the way I'm living, if I stop putting boundaries on my time and not saying yes to everybody on the planet because I can't without overeating, I will go back to overeating. So it's a balance, and it takes a lot of self-care for me to show up in the world as a productive and healthy human being. And so that's what I teach people.
I was going to ask you if it is something that you still battle. I know for me, no matter how much I know, no matter how much I meditate, no matter how much I run or lift heavy things or whatever, if I'm having a tough day, there are days when I feel like I deserve to be punished with whatever crap is in the pantry. And no logic, no fancy woo-woo meditation is going to talk me out of making this bad decision because I messed up. I let it get to me. It beat me today. Do you have moments like that where you just feel beaten down by it? And do you still cave?
It's been a long time by the grace of God, but I've put a lot into, I've been on this journey for 30 plus years. Yeah. So I'm kind of a veteran, but I'm not cured still. So what I mean is really, let me explain something which I think will be helpful to your listeners. My experience when people are trying to if they like the idea of going and looking at the deeper issue, I start people off by taking the PEP test. And PEP is an acronym, and PEP is PEP. And the first P stands for painkiller. So we use food as a painkiller. It just numbs us out. That's why we like the heavier foods. We don't generally binge on salads, because it's too watery and light. Give me the donuts, give me the pastries, give me the chocolate. So we use it as a painkiller, and then we use it as an escape. The E is escape, because life can be really overwhelming and we just want to check out. We just want to check out. And the last P is punishment, which I'm glad you brought that up. So and this is less intuitive because we think of food as reward, yummy foods as a reward, but there is part of our psyche as emotional eaters, which is very self-negating, very self-hating. And so my experience is we're so hard on ourselves when we make mistakes. And so then we just add insult to injury and beat ourselves up with food. So food is a reward until you binge and feel it disgusting, and then hate yourself. So there is definitely that mechanism, that internal mechanism that allows us to kill pain, escape our problems, and beat ourselves up all in the same time. And so that's tricky stuff. And that does come from deeper, those old wounds, those old beliefs that we got as kids. And so it can get dark, it can get dark fast. My experience is it just takes a lot of inner work. Yeah. And yes, I guess I seem like a normal eater, but I'm not in the clear in that it could always come back. So it's not like I won't say, oh yeah, I'm cured, or, oh no, Jeremy, I'm over that. I know it can come back if I have enough stress in my life. Yeah. So those are the places I have to go. I have to kind of take a look. If I do have cravings, I have to look at what's really going on. And stress is a big part of it. I can't take on too much in my life. I can't blow off my meditation and these things. And I will say, I also have to have a community with other emotional eaters, because that's vital. I cannot do these things on my own. My head will talk me out of doing anything healthy for myself if it's just me trying to manage my recovery process. My experience is we have to have community, and I do create community for my clients. I don't work one-on-one for the most part because there's so much good juju in looking across Zoom at other people who have the same struggles. But it's a journey. It takes time to really be able to have that kind of freedom. So, I mean, it sounds like you're on the right path for sure.
Working on it. So just sort of in closing, we've already mentioned some of the strategies that you outlined for the people you work with. Somebody who's hearing this is just like, I'm at the end of my rope. I've tried everything. I've dieted. I've failed. The weight's gone up. The weight's gone down. What's like 2 or 3 things people can do just to make a really simple start today toward a better path?
Yeah. So I would say, look at your calendar, clear some things off. Give yourself a little time to just be, which I know is terrifying for an emotional eater. It's like, don't make me stop and be with myself. So, but it's a very worthy thing to do. I would also recommend what I call 3-meal magic, which is eating 3 meals with nothing in between. That's about the only diet advice I give. And I don't consider it a diet. I consider it an opportunity to just stop eating and start feeling. Start getting acquainted with yourself. If we're constantly snacking all day, we don't know what a feeling is. So how can we deal with the feeling if we can't feel the feeling? So, the 3-meal magic, I mean, I start my clients that way and they're like, oh my God, like it just changed. It's a game changer because they didn't realize how much they reach for food, how much food is their support until they limit it to 3 meals. So eat 3 good balanced meals for sure. I have a group on Facebook called The Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating. I welcome for anybody to be a part of that. And I also have a podcast, The Heal Your Hunger Show, that I just talk a lot about the underlying causes of emotional eating. It's a show for emotional eaters. And lastly, I would tell people, stop dieting. Just stop it. It's not going to work. The statistics are stacked against you. So just definitely start realizing food is a teacher. And what it's taught me is to slow down and develop a relationship with myself and start being a friend to myself. And the last thing is reach out for help, because if you're trying to do it alone, I get it. It's kind of a humbling thing, especially if you're a man, to reach out for help with. So it's just, there's no shame in it. We tend to have this idea that we should be able to do it on our own, but food is the hardest of all addictions. You have to eat.
Yeah.
You have to eat. So stop thinking that it's silly to need support with what you put in your mouth. Food is highly addictive. We started as younger than most people. Drug addicts start around 12 or 13 to numb out with drugs, but we start at like 5 or 6, to numb out with food. So the cards are stacked against you. There's no shame in reaching out for help.
All great stuff. Where do we learn more about you, the podcast, the book, and all the things you have to offer?
Yeah, the best place is healyourhunger.com, HEAL, healyourhunger.com. I also have a quiz on there that's free where you can find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. So just take the quiz and start there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and your insight on this. A really great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Tricia Nelson. She's the host of the Heal Your Hunger show and author of Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And we're actually going to be appearing on her show in the weeks ahead. We will update you on where you can hear that episode. But a really great conversation, and hope that you got as much out of that as we did.
I was a little disappointed that I couldn't join that interview. I had a million questions for her, but I was busy eating something somewhere, I'm sure.
COVID chips.
COVID pretzels.
I think you need to go meditate on how to put down the COVID pretzels and stop snacking on those disease-ridden chips or whatever they are.
So I am looking forward to being on her podcast, so I have the opportunity to talk to her. But in the meantime, I'd love to encourage everyone to go and join our Facebook group, the Fit Mess Community, where we are having open, vulnerable conversations about various things, including this month's challenge. Again, it's just been a really great place for me to air a couple of thoughts and get some feedback and some encouragement. And I think it's been very useful. So please go out, look for us, find it, join us, contribute to the conversation, or just stalk everyone in the group. It's okay.
That works too. That works too. You can find links to that and all of the other links mentioned on the show at thefitmess.com. Check the show notes for this episode for links to Tricia Nelson and to the Facebook group. That's going to do it for now. Thanks so much for listening and for subscribing on your favorite podcast player. We will be back next Wednesday with a brand new episode at thefitmess.com.
See everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.